Living with food allergies is not easy. Imagine being afraid to just put a phone to your face because the previous user might have eaten peanuts and such exposure could land you in the hospital. If you are a parent and your child suffers from food allergies, my heart is with you. It's estimated that 15 million Americans suffer from food allergies. There's a good chance you or someone you love is counted in this group. But food allergies are also tough for the food industry to deal with. Has been evidenced by the tremendous number of recalls related to unlabeled food allergens in recent times. Hello, I'm Jason Huffman, Editor-in-Chief of Food Chemical News. Welcome to the Knife and Fork Show. The FDA recognizes 8 food types as major allergen sources and requires food companies to label if the presence of any of these can be detected. The FDA's 8 major food allergen sources are milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, shellfish, fish, soy, and wheat. But due to cross-contamination, products that were not originally intended to contain any of these ingredients might still trigger an allergic reaction and violate labeling rules, resulting in illnesses and an expensive recall for a company. But the trouble with food allergies is not something that FDA is ignoring. There are some things going on at the agency that ultimately could change the way food allergens are regulated or labeled in the future. To break this all down, I've got 3 terrific guests today, including 2 former longtime FDA officials. With me are John Lair, CEO of FAIR, Food Allergy and Research Education, a trade association that was created recently by the merger of 2 other food allergy associations. Also with me is Bob Lake, a member of FAIR's board of directors and a food safety consultant in Washington, D.C., who worked for 3 decades at FDA, including 5 years as Director of Regulation and Policy at the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. And back again with us is Betty Campbell, a food labeling expert with EA Consulting in Alexandria, Virginia, who previously led the Food Safety Labeling Division at FDA. So, let's talk about this issue. 15 million Americans. Mm-hmm. What percentage of the country is that?
So that's about 4% of the overall population. And then 15 million Americans, there are about 6 million of those 15 million who are children. So that's about 8% of the overall population.
And how often are people sent to emergency rooms as a result of attacks related to food allergens?
So there's a research study that recently came out that demonstrates every 3 minutes somebody is going to an emergency room because of a food-related reaction.
You talked about the number of children. Mm-hmm. It's higher than the number of adults. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Why do children suffer from this more often?
Well, so it's 6 million children, 9 million total adults. You know, I don't think we have enough research to say definitively why this issue, food allergies, is increasing so greatly. I think there's a lot of theories out there, and we're looking into those, but we don't have any explanation at this point as to why it's on the rise.
Is it that the percentage of people suffering from food allergies is on the increase, or is it that we're just more aware of it than we used to be?
It's a really good question, and I put that same question to a researcher at the National Institutes of Health. And he said that in his estimation, it is actually on the increase. There's something going on that we're unaware of that's causing people to become allergic to food in ways that they were not in the past.
I imagine there's some different theories being explored.
Yeah, there are a lot of different theories. There's a hygiene hypothesis, in other words, that we're washing our hands, we're too cleanly, and that's the one that's most commonly put out there, but there's a number of other theories that are put out. The fact is, if you ask the leading scientists, they'll tell you we just don't know quite yet.
Now, Betty, you do a lot of work with the industry now. Why are food allergens so much trouble for the food industry?
Well, it's because it's very difficult, even though they clean well and take precautions, it's very difficult to know for sure that there's absolutely none present when it's unintentional. Intentional allergens, allergenic ingredients, that's easy enough to handle. But if you're making a non-allergenic product in the same plant, then it takes a lot of effort to keep the allergen from getting into the non-allergen containing food. And so the industry has been struggling with that all along. And ever since the allergen declaration law was enacted, or even before that, the largest part of FDA's food recalls were for undeclared allergens, and those were mostly the unintentional ones. Right. So it's long been a big problem.
Now, the food industry is, some food companies have tried to counter the liability issues with this by starting to declare that there might be allergens in products, just on the off chance that there might have been cross-contamination. That seems to be happening. Is that a significant problem? I would imagine people who suffer from food allergens want to consume some of these products, and because they see that warning, they won't touch them.
That's right. I mean, I think food labeling is part of helping people make healthy choices about the food they use. So we want to be better about food labeling, and I think there's a lot of concern out there among families about what's in products, and may contain laws, give certain amount of information, but maybe not the whole explanation about what's in the food.
I know you have a viewpoint on this in terms of the person who's concerned about liability versus the person who's really concerned about food safety.
Well, the allergen labeling law at FDA mandates the declaration of allergens that are intentionally added to food, but it does not mandate labeling for unintentional or cross-contact allergens. And FDA does not have a policy. That's an optional statement. FDA's policy, however, is that a company cannot use this may contain or processed on the same equipment as statement as a cover for inadequate cleanup, for inadequate processing and cleanup procedures. That must be done before a company uses that statement. And in advising my clients when they say, do I have to use this statement? Should I use this statement? I say, I'm your food and drug advisor. And that's not a food and drug issue. That's a product liability issue. And you need to check with your product liability advisor as to whether you need to do that. But many companies are they think to be on the safe side using these statements. And I don't have specific information, but I've heard that the allergic individuals are not happy with that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I teased this segment by saying there's some exciting things happening at FDA right now. So what's happening at FDA that might change the environment here?
Well, let me speak to that, if I may. One, back in December, FDA published a notice in the Federal Register inviting input on the question of setting thresholds for allergens. Then in January, they published a major new food safety proposal, which is the biggest thing to come down the pike in a long time for food safety generally. But in addition to that is of particular importance to the food allergy community. And they actually published two proposals on the same day.
We're talking about the two FSMA rules.
Right. Well, one, that's right. Both of them,
safety.
Both of them relating to the Food Safety Modernization Act. One relates to produce, which is not that much of an issue for, it's a big safety issue, but not much of an issue for food allergy community. The other one, which is really focused on preventive controls, is very important to the food allergy community. And just to come back to one of the points that Betty was making about product liability, or even more her point that you shouldn't be using labeling, may contain labeling, or that kind of labeling as an excuse for not doing careful controls to prevent the unintended allergens from getting into food. Because the whole purpose of this new proposal is to require across the board for food safety issues, but including for allergens, that FDA or that the company evaluate the hazard. And the new law defines now for the first time allergens as a safety hazard as well as a labeling concern, and requires that companies systematically evaluate the hazard, systematically put controls in place to prevent the hazards, all hazards, whether microbiological, chemical, but including hazards from food allergens, from occurring in their plants. And they have to monitor those controls, take corrective actions if there's any deviation, and have a recall plan in place if anything gets out of the plant that is not in accord with these controls.
So I mentioned earlier too the idea of setting allergy thresholds, allergen thresholds. How realistic is it that we'll get any kind of rule to this regard? Are we going to get anything that will set thresholds for various allergens?
Well, and Betty may have some comments on this too. The fact that FDA has requested information certainly shows that they are interested, and they ask a number of very interesting questions. The questions also tell me that they really don't have everything they need at the present time. Eventually, I think it'll happen, but I don't think that's going to happen, in my view, anytime soon, simply because that whole exercise is much earlier in the process. The proposal on preventive controls, I mean, they've initiated rulemaking on that. It and everything else that relates to the Food Safety Modernization Act has priority. So that, I think, is going to get pushed ahead sooner. But even that's going to take a while to complete.
Yeah, we don't know, FDA doesn't know yet, whether adequate information is available at this stage to support establishing a threshold, a limit. And any threshold would be a legal limit, is what they're thinking about. And that would be useful to everybody, but you have to have data, and there's a lot of progress being made, but it's not clear that there's enough. And FDA has suggested that they would do perhaps one allergen at a time as the data are accumulated.
And I can say, you know, this is an issue that has broad implications for the food allergic community. And, you know, so we wanted to make sure that we understood what our community was thinking about the issue of thresholds. And we recently completed a survey which had 5,600 people responding. And we basically asked them, what do you know about thresholds and the issue of thresholds, and what do you think about the issue of thresholds? And, you know, it really goes against what we've been saying to our families for many years, which is avoid the allergens at all cost. So there's a lot of concern, as you can imagine, among the food allergy community about the issue of thresholds. And I understand that it's years away from even being considered for implementation. But I think there's a lot more that we need to know and understand about the issue of thresholds.
Yeah, and let me just comment, building on that a little bit, or another play off of it. One of the things that's fascinating to me, and I've been following recalls from both FDA and USDA, Food Safety and Inspection Service, since I joined the FAN Board of Directors a little over 2 years ago. And there are a huge number of recalls, both FDA-regulated product and USDA-regulated meat and poultry products, because of undeclared allergens. And what is striking to me about that is that even with a precautionary labeling, there are labels out there that don't say anything about containing allergens that obviously do contain allergens and leading to recalls. So there is a need for at least some segments of the industry to be more careful than they have been. And I think that the preventive controls that FDA is proposing, you know, is really going right at that issue, and I think it's going to make a huge difference.
Well, that's it. We're out of time. I want to thank our guests, John Lear, Bob Lake, and Betty Campbell.